Number 9. Ciudad Juarez and Acapulco, Mexico. Mexico as a country is a place of enormous history, beautiful vacation spots, and so on. But when it comes to places like Ciudad Juarez and Acapulco, you need to be very careful about where you go and how you travel and who you may go and trust. Many places in Mexico are perfectly safe, with plenty of police officers and low crime. However, some cities are not as lucky. Why do so few tourists travel to Ciudad Juarez and Acapulco? Because these cities are some of many that are known to be very dangerous due to the numerous drug cartels and corrupt officials that are there. Not to mention the roads around these cities, as well as multiple others in the highlands of Mexico, are ones that are known to have illegal roadblocks that can lead to potential kidnappings, as well as other dangers to those that travel. This says nothing of the police force that can sometimes be just as dangerous as the cartels. Corruption among those who are supposed to protect law-abiding citizens is absolutely tragic. Number 8. Praia de Boa Viagem. The beach known as Praia de Boa Viagem can be found near the city of Recife in Brazil, and at first glance it may seem like a perfectly regular and beautiful beach. But since it started up as a beach in 1992, the beach has been infamous for shark attacks. In fact, there have been 50 reported ones since the opening, with 19 of those 50 being fatal attacks on the people there. This shows that this is a place you need to be very careful in. The waters are so dangerous that the people who visit it merely go to the sand and relax and play. That way they don't have to risk having a shark swim near them and attack. After having so many shark attacks, people started to research why it was so dangerous. They found that a construction project had chemical residues put into the water that disrupted the natural patterns of the sharks, as well as items being dumped into the nearby waters which lured the sharks to the beach area. An initiative was started though to capture but not kill, tag, and place the sharks into deeper waters away from the beach. It's making progress, and one day it could lead to all shark attacks in the area being stopped. But until then, it's a place you need to tread very lightly around. Have you ever seen a shark in the wild? Maybe just a fin sticking out of the water? It's enough to send people scrambling up a beach. Did your vacation in Australia or Hawaii turn out momentarily terrifying? Let me know about your experiences in the comments below. Then be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. There are loads of amazing videos coming out right here on World List, and you don't want to miss them. Number 7. Rio de Janeiro. If you wanted to head to Brazil to go and have some fun, easily one of the best places to go would be Rio de Janeiro. Or at least that's what the world at large would tell you, because it's known for being a fun place to go and visit. It even has events like Carnival, parties, and a friendly beach culture, delicious food, and so on and so forth. But not unlike many other major cities of the world, there are dangers in Rio that need to be revealed to all in order to keep you safe. For example, while you might think it's safe to be in one of the many city areas, the slums of Rio de Janeiro are infamous for their crime. So much so that a war between police and gangs has been going on there for an incredibly long time. Adding to the problems, though, is that even in the more safe areas of the city, gun violence is rampant, and there have even been crimes caught on camera during simple things like news reports because of the danger that's all around. It's understandable why Brazil would want to glorify its most famous city. It's a place that gets a lot of tourists, and tourists bring in money. But if you want to stay safe, like truly safe, you need to go and be mindful of all that's around you in Rio. Number 6. Bikini Atoll, Marshall Islands. On the surface, Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands seems like a place that you'd want to go to in order to unwind, relax, and enjoy the sun. It has beautiful beaches, clear waters, and makes you think that civilization as a whole is miles away from you, which is part of the point in going to a private island, right? As a result, those who go there often enjoy sport fishing and lagoon diving, among other activities, all of which are legitimate and fun, so long as you stay off the island itself. There's a significant reason why the island was deserted by humanity. There was nuclear testing on the island back in the 1940s and 1950s. And this radioactive site continued being dangerous until well into the 70s, when families thought the island was safe. But further tests proved that it wasn't. Now the island is only visited by those who can manage for themselves via self-sufficient boats. You can't just fly to the island yourself, as the capabilities to do so can be scarce. And there have been incidents of people getting stranded on the island for over a week because of machine problems, thus exposing them to the radiation of the island for unsafe levels of time. And as nuclear tests have proved, radioactivity doesn't die down easily, and there were tests done right next to the island, including one that was done underwater that sent radiation in all directions. So while it's fine to be on the waters around the island, stay away from the main island itself, else suffer the consequences. Radiation can lead to cancer and other destructive diseases over time. It would be much safer to visit somewhere like Hawaii instead. Number 5. Caracas, Venezuela. It says a lot when you have a capital of a country being both a major tourist destination and yet also a place where you shouldn't want to go under any circumstances. And this is indeed what's going on in Caracas, Venezuela. The city that was once a major beacon of joy and beauty has descended into horror in terms of violence. It's said that for every 120,000 people in Caracas, over 120 will be killed via violence. That's not a good statistic. The biggest reason for this is the overwhelming gang violence that can be heard almost daily on the streets of the poverty-stricken neighborhoods. These neighborhoods have become a bit infamous because they're all now the homes of major gangs who seek to do maximum damage to those they deem as threats. What's more, if you are to travel there, it's said you should do without bringing many valuables. And should you go and have a car with you, keep it locked at all times. This isn't a place for a carefree vacation. Number 4. The KOKODA and the Black Cat Trails. Papua New Guinea is a nation that has many beautiful things attached to it and is frequently visited by travelers from all over. It's also one of the most dangerous in the world depending on what you do there. A great example of this lies in the KOKODA and Black Cat Trails that many people dare to adventure on. Every year, scores of people, especially from Australia, make the journey to Papua New Guinea to hike the 60 miles of trail. This is a journey that's so rough and treacherous, it can take 6 whole days to complete. It isn't the dangers, though, that make many people wonder whether they should truly do the journey. The trail itself is very hard to traverse, and many people have been hurt just walking along it. There are also tons of species of native wildlife that you need to be careful of, including scores of leeches, which can be real impediments to those trying to complete the venture. But the biggest danger may just be man and not your fellow traveler, but locals in the area who aren't afraid to get deadly if you're caught on the trail at the wrong time. In 2003, a group was walking the trail when they were attacked by spear and machete-wielding locals. 2 people were killed, 7 were injured, and the items that they had were all stolen. So while you may want to go and take on the challenges these trails provide, you should be doubly sure that the risk is worth the reward. Number 3. Mount Everest. One of the most popular tourist destinations in the world, Mount Everest is a hallowed ground of sorts in terms of adventure and wanting to push oneself to the limit and beyond to see the world from a viewpoint they could only have dreamed of before. The problem, though, is that this experience has been glamorized so much that people risk everything by going to it. The mountain stands over 29,000 feet above sea level, making it the highest peak above the waters that's climbable. Though many do scoff at the problems that await them, the mountain holds many dangers that potential climbers need to take notice of. In the documented history of people climbing Mount Everest, over 300 people have died. Many more have been injured or seriously affected by their journey too, because of the dangers they weren't prepared for. To be clear, it's not impossible to climb the mountain. There are many guides who are paid to help would-be climbers get up the mountain, many of whom have experience in doing so. However, it should be noted that business ventures have made it so these guides can skirt safety guidelines in order to get more potential climbers and thus make more money. The major dangers, though, lie in the weather, winds, snow, and other random events that can cause people to turn back, get injured, or even die. And then there's altitude sickness, something that affects many climbers. Your body reacts differently when at higher altitudes, and most people can't take that. During certain seasons, it'll snow or gust heavy winds as climbers make their way up. Another major flaw is that because the season to climb the mountain is so small, people will go to the mountain by the hundreds. And when they get to the summit, they have to wait in line while being exposed to the elements the whole time, just so some people can take a unique picture. Amateurs and experienced climbers alike have gone and died on the mountain, and if you don't want to be the next statistic, you need to be sure you weigh all possibilities before going up. Number 2. Cave diving. When it comes to diving in the oceans, there are many dangers that are known to the world at large, including decompression sickness, predators, and so on. But for some, the true adventure goes with cave diving. or the literal act of diving into underwater and underground caves that could reveal new and exciting things. This is a very specific and technical kind of diving, to the extent that many people are warned not to do this unless they're very experienced because of the dangers. Even experienced divers are told to rely on their training when things get hairy, because it's panic that usually kills cave divers. Not to mention the environments they're going to are usually unmapped or aren't able to be made safe for various reasons. So while it may sound cool to go cave diving, you need to be aware that there are risks that could end your life if you're not careful. Cave diving is one of the most dangerous activities in the world, and the reason why is not exactly a mystery. Number 1. Running of the bulls. The nation of Spain is known for many cultural and historical wonders and traditions, one of which is the infamous running of the bulls. This annual event has thousands of people, many of whom are thrill seekers, crowd the streets of Pamplona in a guarded-off area. Then a set of fighter bulls charge down the streets, and the thrill seekers have to run 2,875 feet in order to get to safety. This creates immediate danger for all who participate, mainly because the bulls can injure, maim, and kill you if they get too close. Though death at this event has only happened 16 times, that's still 16 deaths. Gorging and trampling are among the biggest injuries. It's stated that every year hundreds of the runners are injured in some capacity, proving that while it may sound like a fun thing to do, if you're not ready, you're probably going to get hurt. Number 10. Giant squid. It doesn't really get much bigger than a giant squid. These monsters from the extreme depths of our ocean are very elusive, with only a few of them ever being spotted alive, or even dead for that matter. Yet one of them washed ashore on a beach in Wellington, New Zealand, just in time for everyone to get some photos with it. The cephalopod, which measured roughly 13 feet long with all of its tentacles stretched out, was first discovered by a trio of brothers as they were searching for a good spot to go diving. They immediately contacted the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, who then made plans to have the squid properly removed and studied. This is a super rare find, and what's even more impressive is that it's only a baby squid. A true giant adult squid would grow to be way larger. Adults can grow to be over 40 feet in length. The last one that washed ashore in New Zealand was 23 feet long, and that one turned up on a beach back in 2015 in Kaikoura. These monster cephalopods spend most of their time hiding in the deep parts of the ocean, and so nobody is really sure how this newest one ended up on the beach. But nonetheless, it is definitely one of the biggest and most impressive sea creatures ever found washed ashore. Number 9. Giant jelly blob. This giant jelly monster thing looks like a horrible creature from any kind of science fiction movie. It's absolutely enormous and it's unique, and just like the giant squid, this freaky red jelly was found in New Zealand. It was first stumbled upon by a family minding their own business, walking down the beach. And while even for New Zealand a giant jelly isn't totally out of the ordinary, this one appeared to be breathing or moving. According to the family who stumbled upon it, it was unlike anything they'd ever seen before. The creature was spotted in Pakiri Beach, 55 miles from Auckland. And to be quite honest, the creature kind of looked like a bubbling volcano. It was the same kind of shape as a volcano, and it even had a red center of bubbling liquid at its peak. But according to Fox News, what the family discovered that day on the beach is known as a lion's mane jellyfish. This is because it has a mane of extremely long tentacles that hang from the underside of its body, with each tentacle being divided into 8 smaller clusters of up to 150 tentacles each. These 1,000-armed jellies are also the biggest jellyfish in the entire world. They can grow to be the same size as a blue whale. With all of its tentacles stretched out, the lion's mane jellyfish can grow to be 190 feet long. It is an absolute giant. As for the enormous jelly on the beach, it's hard to say exactly how long it would have been in the ocean. On land, it just looked like a melted block of jelly. The good news was that the family was smart enough not to play around, or somebody could have gotten a serious shock from one of the jellyfish's toxic tentacles. Have you ever found a jellyfish washed up on the beach? Or maybe some other kind of sea creature? Some people have found hermit crabs or other strange little creepy crawly animals. What was your catch the last time you went to the beach? Tell me about it in the comments below, and then make sure you subscribe if you haven't already for more awesome content like this. Number 8. Giant sunfish. All the way across the Pacific from New Zealand is California, where one of the largest, rarest, and ugliest fish ever washed up on a beach in Santa Barbara back in 2019. And it's one thing to find a normal fish somehow beached on land, but the people who stumbled upon a giant 7-foot sunfish must have been particularly alarmed. This fish is longer than you are probably tall. It's also known as the hoodwinker sunfish, and it's supposed to live only in the southern hemisphere. An evolutionary biologist named Thomas Turner from the University of California was so shocked when he heard about the sunfish beached nearby that he went down to the beach with his family to check out the monster for himself. According to Turner, it was the strangest fish he had ever seen up close in his life. This is because the giant hoodwinker sunfish is one weird customer. Rather than having the typical fish shape, this weirdo is formed just like a big circular disc. The hoodwinker sunfish is almost completely flat, too. It also doesn't have a tail. This fish has sharp fins that stick out of its top and bottom, and it flaps them like wings while underwater to move around. Some more marine biologists went down to the beach to collect samples of the stranded animal and to dispose of its body properly. But nobody could figure out how the giant hoodwinker sunfish got all the way from where it's supposed to be living, in the waters around Australia, to California. It was a total mystery. Number 7. Massive sea serpent. You might have seen a giant oarfish before. It's one of the biggest and strangest fish living in the ocean today. It's also one of those special rare fish you can only catch on rainy days in Animal Crossing if you're playing that. And it's also the longest fish in the world. The giant oarfish is the closest thing on Earth to an actual sea serpent. And while they're usually spotted washed up in the Philippines or Japan, one of them recently washed up on a beach near Los Angeles. This thing was so huge that 16 people had to drag it fully onto the shore and then hold it up to take a photograph. The giant oarfish is in fact the inspiration for the ancient sea serpent legend, and in the depths of the ocean they can grow to be even longer than a giant squid. I'm talking 50 feet long and 600 pounds in weight. According to workers at the Catalina Island Marine Institute, this particular oarfish was the discovery of a lifetime. Nobody had ever seen one so big in real life. This is because oarfish typically live around 3,000 feet deep, and that makes sighting the creature about as rare as seeing a giant squid. According to professionals, the animal looked to have died of natural causes. It only measured about 18 feet in length, with the longest specimen ever recorded being 26 feet long. You might also know the giant oarfish under some of its other names. It also goes by king of the herring, Pacific oarfish, streamer fish, and ribbonfish. The first one ever found was in 1772 by a Norwegian biologist. Number 6. Indonesian sea beast. One of the largest and most disgusting monsters of all time was spotted on a beach washed up in Indonesia. This happened on the shore of the Maluku Islands, and at the time of discovery, the monster was in such a late stage of decomposition that nobody had any idea what it was. Some people speculated that it could have been a giant squid, and others said it was a decomposing whale, and still others said it was a hellish sea monster. Considering this creature was at least 50 feet long, there weren't a whole lot of options. Not that many creatures in the ocean can grow to be that huge. After pictures were posted online and some professionals came into the discussion, it was quickly determined that the corpse turning the water red was a baleen whale. There are 15 different classifications of baleen whale, including the humpback and the blue whale. And because the beast was indeed so rotten, scientists could not identify any more precisely than that. A whale and dolphin conservation charity told the Huffington Post that after they identified some groove patterns on the carcass, they determined it was probably a blue whale, but that was really just an educated guess. And the reason the corpse didn't look anything like a whale is because the gases from its decomposition caused the carcass to bloat and just kind of fall apart. It may look nasty, but it's just the natural way whales decompose. I mean, sometimes nature's kind of disturbing. Number 5. Hairy creatures in the Philippines. The carcass of a large and unusually hairy sea creature washed up on a beach in the Philippines just recently. And this is one of the stranger things to have ever washed up on a beach. Considering with the white hair all over it, the thing kinda looked like an oversized Shih Tzu. What's really strange is that the monster appeared following a massive 6.7 earthquake in the area, meaning it could have been from deep in the ocean but was belched up during the storm. It was about 15 feet in length, and locals were quick to post selfies with the hairy beast all over the internet. And some people quickly pointed out that the thing looked like a soggy version of Falkor from the Neverending Story. But realistically, the corpse could belong to a dugong, one of the cooler but less well-known marine animals. Then again, this strange carcass could just be a whale. The Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources were quick to dispose of the animal, so we may never know its true identity. For now, it's being called the globster, and that seems just fine to me. Number 4. Fanged beast. The fanged beast that washed up on the beach after Hurricane Harvey in Texas might not be the biggest in the world, but it is certainly one of the most terrifying. It looked like a dolphin with no eyes and the teeth of a demon. Somebody found this decaying freak while taking a stroll on a beach in Texas City, and she posted the photos online asking for help in identifying it. An eel expert came forward claiming that the creature was probably a fangtooth snake eel. Fangtooth eels live near Texas and have enormous teeth that look just like fangs. The expert claimed that because of the strong winds and flooding that happened with Hurricane Harvey, the creature was probably pushed out of its natural habitat and thrown onto the beach. This thing usually lives around 300 feet deep in the Atlantic Ocean, so its position on the beach really says something about the strength of the winds. As for the fate of this horrifying monster, it was left on the beach for nature to do its thing. And hopefully no more of these fanged creatures wash up where they have no business being. Number 3. Trash whale. This next story is gonna get a little graphic. Everyone knows that the biggest animals on Earth are whales. Specifically, the blue whale is the biggest animal that has ever lived on our planet, and that includes the dinosaurs. But the sperm whale is also huge. It's not as big as the blue whale, but it's certainly massive. And recently, a sperm whale washed up on a beach in the Isle of Harris in Western Scotland. While it was no mystery as to the whale's identity, it's what they found inside of the whale that makes this such a horrifying story. The whale was stranded on the beach for 2 days before employees from the Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme could arrive to do an autopsy and properly bury the animal. Because that's just the kind of thing they do in Scotland. The whale itself was around 45 feet in length. It was also filled with trash. As soon as the workers cut open the stomach of the sperm whale on the beach, its guts exploded outward. Inside the guts of the whale was so much trash that you wouldn't even believe your eyes. Workers found plastic, chunks of net, bundles of rope, tubing, gloves, plastic bags, and much more, all bundled in a tight clump in the animal's stomach. It had about 200 pounds of garbage inside of it. The marine worker said that even though the discovery was horrific, it likely wasn't the direct cause of the animal's death. But nonetheless, it's pretty disturbing to think that whales are swimming around in the ocean with hundreds of pounds of rope bundled into their stomachs. We really do litter too much. Number 2. Half a shark. It's pretty rare to find a whole shark washed up on the beach. It's even more rare to find half a shark washed up on the beach. But that's exactly what happened at New Smyrna Beach in Florida back in 2017. Not only did half a shark find its way onto the sand, but it appeared to have been eaten by something. In fact, it looked like the shark had been chomped in half by a much larger creature. This is shocking considering that the shark was at least 5 feet long and in pretty good shape. A beach safety spokeswoman told local news that the shark on the beach was likely a black tip or a spinner shark, and that it was probably attacked by something much larger. But I guess we already knew that from all the bite marks. The biggest mystery here is that nobody knows what tried to eat this small shark. It could have been a barracuda, it could have been a larger shark, or it could have been a monster we don't even know about. Number 1. Invisible giants from the deep. Now, this is a bit of a weird tale, but there is something bizarre going on here. In the United Kingdom, the average man stands about 5 feet 9 inches tall. They also have feet that are around 11 inches. And this is relevant because at a beach in Blackpool, residents were shocked to find enormous footprints leading across the sand as if a giant had walked out of the water. It was as if Poseidon himself had emerged from the sea. The footprints were around 100 feet long each, meaning that the person would have needed to be at least 620 feet tall. Surely no ordinary Englishman could have made these footprints. But in fact, it was just an ordinary guy. The 3 footsteps were created by a pair of high-speed visual artists named Jed Bryan and Job Hicks. These guys had to quickly create the footprints in the sand before the tide rose and the water came up to erase them. According to the initial report from the Daily Mail, the project only took about 4 hours to do, but it did create quite the panic among the locals. After all, it's not every day that a nearly 700-foot person walks out of the ocean and into your town and then vanishes. Where would someone that large even go to hide? Number 10. Cursed mummy cheese. When you're talking about creepy discoveries, there's nothing quite as bizarre as putting the words cheese and mummy together. Of course, I'm talking about the cursed mummy cheese that was recently discovered in Egypt. It's either cursed or seriously contaminated. Either way, I don't really want to eat it. The cheese was discovered within a large cache of broken clay jars in the tomb of a former mayor of Memphis. This is the Memphis of ancient Egypt, not the one in Tennessee. The tomb was most likely built in the 13th century BC, which would make the cheese roughly 3,300 years old. Researchers from a university in Italy stumbled upon the cache during an excavation back in 2014. However, it's taken a while to study all the discoveries within the tomb. The oldest cheese ever wasn't reported until 2018, after researchers examined the cheese and took samples at their chemistry lab for proper analysis. The analysis eventually revealed that the cursed mummy cheese was probably made of a mixture of cow milk and goat milk. But things get even stranger. Like I mentioned, this isn't normal cheese, it's cursed. The researchers also discovered that the cheese contained a special protein that can cause a very contagious disease known as brucellosis. The disease is typically transferred from cows to humans through milk and contaminated meat. Take a bite of this cursed cheese, and you'll find yourself sicker than death. Number 9. The spiral mass grave. In Mexico, the ancient Maya and Aztec cultures practiced all kinds of elaborate funeral rites and religious sacrifices. These were key parts of the ancient Mesoamerican civilizations. And while researchers have found hordes of evidence that supports this, from an Aztec temple with 32 sets of neck bones to racks of human skulls, a more recent discovery out of Mexico City has revealed something truly strange. It's like something out of a bad Rob Zombie movie. Archaeologists discovered 10 human skeletons positioned in a spiral that were likely buried with their arms interlinking. This grave is about 2,400 years old, and it's the largest number of skeletons in a single burial plot from the pre-classical period of Mexico. That's from between 2000 BC and 280. Researchers from the National Institute of Anthropology and History have identified the remains as belonging to both men and women, including a toddler and an infant. All the people in the spiral were buried in a single event. However, the nature of this event is completely unknown. The archaeologists don't understand why they were linked together at the arms or positioned in such a strange spiral. So what's the craziest thing you've ever found? Maybe an old knife or hatchet somewhere in the woods with a mysterious past? Or something maybe even more bizarre? Let me know in the comments section below. Then be sure to subscribe to World List for more amazing videos just like this one. Number 8. Spiked skulls. Let's check out some more creepy skeletons. The next disturbing skeleton find is from Scandinavia, where archaeologists in Sweden unearthed human remains never before seen in the region. There were skulls found impaled on spikes that date back over 8,000 years. But the evidence is mysterious to say the least. It would appear that the bodies had been buried before the heads were cut off. And this itself is boggling archaeologists from Stockholm University in Sweden. First of all, the skeletons were discovered at the bottom of a peat bog. And the way the skeletons were laid out suggested that their deaths had been for ceremonial purposes. But even after closely examining 10 of the skeletons, researchers were no closer to understanding what had happened. Among the human bones were animal bones from bears and badgers, and the evidence showed that the animals were butchered after death, but not for eating. The human skulls were found with severe trauma to the tops of the skulls. However, the traumas showed signs of healing, and this means that these 10 people had been bashed in the head and then allowed to heal. The researchers also found over 400 wooden stakes scattered throughout the dig site. They believe some could have been used as part of a fence, but some were also clearly used for jamming through the skulls. As for why any of it happened or what kind of ritual went down, researchers simply don't know. All they know is that 8,000 years ago, some people got clobbered on the head, and then they had their heads chopped off, and then they had their heads shoved on spikes and thrown into a lake. Number 7. 4 legs and 4 arms. Believe it or not, a baby in Uganda was born with 4 arms and 4 legs, and locals are worried that it's because of witchcraft. This is not something that generally happens, either being born with 8 limbs or assuming your baby is the product of witchcraft, but it does happen sometimes nonetheless. The pregnancy was completely normal, but when the baby came out, he had 4 arms and 4 legs. Apparently, the extra limbs had been part of a twin growing alongside of him. However, the baby absorbed the rest of the other twin and managed to grow himself a few extra appendages along the way. Tests showed that the boy had his liver and heart on the wrong sides of his body. This is a condition known as parasitic twins and happens when two embryos begin developing in utero but don't separate. One embryo will maintain the dominant development and basically absorb everything from the other. But it never turns out super well. Extra limbs, missing organs, or things grown in the completely wrong spot. Luckily, this case turned out well in the end. A team of surgeons managed to complete the operation to remove the extra arms and legs, and the baby is expected to be healthy for the remainder of his life. It should also be noted that it's impossible for a person to be born with 8 proportionate limbs. When this kind of thing happens, it's usually with the limbs in very strange positions and hopelessly disfigured. Number 6. The Hand of Moa. The giant moa claw discovered in a cave system on a mountain in New Zealand has long been a creepy source of mystery. It obviously looks like the claw from some horrifying beast out of a monster movie, but it actually belonged to a giant moa bird about 3,300 years ago. And these birds went extinct roughly 700 years ago. And so far, this claw has been the best preserved leftover ever found. It came complete with nails, flesh, and muscles. These birds were about 12 feet tall and could easily peck your eyes right out of your head. But even though the discovery happened 3 decades ago, it's been getting a lot of attention recently. This is because scientists won't stop talking about bringing the bird back to life. Scientists from Harvard University claim they can do it, but considering the atmosphere of 2020, people have been revolting against the idea of resurrecting a prehistoric monster that could eat a human baby for breakfast. The claw is creepy enough on its own. This is not the time for us to be bringing back a whole bird. Number 5. The Unluckiest Death. All the people who were caught in the Mount Vesuvius eruption of 79 AD were pretty unfortunate. The people of Pompeii in southern Italy were wiped out pretty much immediately. There was one guy who had a significantly worse time than anyone else. Rather than just being turned into stone instantly as if Medusa had snuck up on him, a giant stone fell on his head. A recent discovery from the Pompeii archaeological site has revealed the skeleton of a man literally crushed by a huge boulder as he was trying to flee the eruption. The rock was likely thrown violently into the air by the volcanic cloud, and the guy just so happened to be in the wrong spot at the wrong time. According to a report from The Independent, the stone block hit the man in his upper body, crushed his thorax, and likely flattened his skull. His head has yet to be identified, and archaeologists believe it's likely hidden somewhere beneath the stone block. The archaeologists also said that the man had been suffering from an infection on his leg, and it likely slowed his escape. You can just imagine this poor guy limping away from an exploding volcano, only to be flattened by a flying stone. It's something you'd kind of only expect to see in a B-rated action movie, but it really did happen, and the creepy evidence is still petrified in the stone to prove it. Number 4. The Hunger Stones. In Europe, hunger stones have been surfacing with dire warnings. This happened just recently, when Europe was being battered by a ridiculously hot summer. While Europe was cooking, the bizarre remnants of ancient societies were revealing themselves all across the land. It's all because of the drought. With such hot temperatures, water levels in many of the rivers throughout Europe reached dangerous lows. And when the water levels dropped, the hunger stones were revealed. These are stones with inscriptions that date all the way back from between 1400 and 1600, back when there had been a drought that caused much of Europe to go hungry. This is why they're called hunger stones. The most famous hunger stone was found in Czech Republic, with an inscription that dates back to 1616 and reads, "If you see me, weep." Another hunger stone was found in Germany from 1417, with a message saying, "If you will again see the stone, so will you weep. So shallow the water was in the year 1417. Basically, all of these stones being revealed by the dropping water levels have some kind of creepy message from the past written on them. And while some people look at it as a warning about future weather disasters, others say that even 400 years ago they had problems with drought, so nothing has actually changed. Number 3. Ferocious animal captives. New evidence coming out of Mexico has revealed that not only did the ancient Aztec people sacrifice humans, but they also had sacrifices that included exotic animals like eagles, jaguars, and pumas. A team of archaeologists excavating the famous Mexican site found roughly 194 bones of animals that had been sacrificed and then put inside of pyramids as decorations. And this is kind of the ancient equivalent to having a bearskin rug. It doesn't get much creepier than decorating your pyramid with eagle bones. And this happened sometime between 1 and 550 AD. It actually predates the infamous Aztec zoo described by the Spanish about 1,000 years later. And to make things even more disturbing, some results showed that the exotic carnivores were likely fed omnivores, like dogs and humans. And that would mean that the Aztecs were literally feeding people to their jaguars. However, it is still unclear whether humans were fed to the animals as part of a sacrifice ritual or, just part of a random Wednesday afternoon feeding frenzy. Number 2. 400 gerbil teeth. In a remote area of Kenya, archaeologists have uncovered the earliest known monumental grave site in the east of Africa. This place was built about 5,000 years ago, likely by the first herders in the region. According to the archaeologists on site, this enormous graveyard was built by the people for the people. It's one of the largest construction projects ever seen in Africa, even if it was thousands of years ago. The site is now known as the Lothagam North Pillar Site, and it's a sprawling field of rock rings, short stone columns, and lumpy burial mounds. In this place, our ancient ancestors would have buried everyone together indiscriminately, whether they were elites or simple tribe members. A single burial chamber would have held almost 600 individuals. But here's where things get creepy. Almost all the skeletons found in this giant graveyard were ornamented with some kind of jewelry. Some wore jewelry made of hippo ivory, and others wore headdresses of animal teeth. One particular corpse wore a disturbing headpiece that consisted of 405 gerbil teeth that experts say were pulled from at least 100 gerbils. It's pretty disgusting. Just imagine bedazzling your hat with teeth you had to manually pull out of 100 gerbils. That is more than just a little bit creepy. Number 1. Pits of skulls. In the ancient Chinese city of Shimeo, researchers have discovered yet another pit full of bones. But this one is unique in its creepiness. First, there are a few important facts about Shimeo. It's a Neolithic city of mystery that was lost for thousands of years, until recent archaeologists began to dig around. They have since found a lot of amazing things, especially in 2020. Some of their discoveries include insights into the original Chinese civilization before any dynasties, plus a disturbing history of ritual sacrifice. There have been pyramids found at this site, and of course the pits of skulls that make any normal person nauseous. Inside the innermost sanctum of the largest pyramid of this ancient city, archaeologists found relief sculptures in stone depicting monsters and serpents, and they also found underneath one of the walls 6 pits filled with 80 human skulls. And that's a lot of decapitating even for a Neolithic tribe. The archaeologists believe that it had something to do with a ritual. The newest information is saying that all of these skulls belong to young women, possibly princesses or noble women from rival tribes and groups. Not a single skull in this place was found with a skeleton. And this is especially creepy considering that the skeletons kinda have to be somewhere, likely buried in even another part of this giant pyramid. Apparently, the area with the skull pits was a sacred place of power, used by the elite members of the society who lived at the top of the pyramid. However, we still don't know exactly what the ritual entailed, or what it could have possibly been for. I mean, what could anyone even really need 80 human skulls for, besides maybe summoning the devil? Number 10. Jason Voorhees. Who was the last person you want to meet underwater? Maybe your girlfriend's father, maybe the ghost of someone you've wronged, or maybe it's Jason Voorhees. For those who don't know, Jason Voorhees is the iconic character from the Friday the 13th franchise, and he's good friends with Freddy Krueger. In 2013, an absolute lunatic built and installed a nearly perfect statue of Jason Voorhees underwater at a popular diving spot in Minnesota. The diving spot is an old iron ore pit, and even today the statue of Jason Voorhees is down there, waiting to scare some poor diver out of their shorts. And while some people might enjoy diving with the legendary Crystal Lake Killer, most people probably wouldn't be very excited to discover the guy in the hockey mask suddenly staring at them from the bottom of a lake in Minnesota. If you didn't already know Jason was down there, you'd probably let loose your bowels immediately upon finding him. Why exactly someone would put such a horrifying and creepy statue underwater for unsuspecting divers to stumble upon, I guess, is really anyone's guess. But it seems like a pretty cruel thing to do. After all, what if he somehow comes to life? What if you had a heart attack and drowned? I mean, the possibilities are kinda endless. Number 9. Scuba skeleton. Probably the worst omen you could come across while diving is a skeleton in a dive suit. That can't bode well for the location you've chosen for your diving adventure. If there are skeletons hanging out at the bottom of the water, you might be in for a pretty nasty surprise yourself. Well, this exact sort of thing happened when the skeleton of a person wearing a black and gray diving suit, flippers, and a backpack was discovered floating in the Ibiza Canal in Spain. It prompted an immediate police investigation, especially since this mysterious dead diver was holding a passport from Morocco and a whole lot of cash in his backpack. The skeleton was first found by some people hanging out on a yacht, who then informed the authorities. The body was collected by an official vessel and was taken for an autopsy. According to the local news reports at the time, investigators were attempting to trace the identity of the person by using the items found on the body and in the backpack. Within the backpack, police not only found a bunch of cash and a passport, but also a mobile phone and a change of clothing inside of waterproof packaging. At the end of the day, it seemed like someone was trying to scuba dive from Morocco to Spain. It could have very well been somebody trying to seek asylum, but that doesn't seem like the brightest way to do it. In any case, this mysterious diver clearly didn't make it to the other side. So what's the creepiest thing you've ever found in your life? Was it some old bones somewhere that they shouldn't have been? Or perhaps it was something else, like blood-soaked clothing? Let me know the thing that gave you the shivers by writing a comment down below. Then be sure to subscribe to World List for even more great videos like this one. Number 8. Underwater Cemetery. Leaving Europe now, let's head over to Florida, where authorities recently announced that divers had discovered a place of burial off the coast of Venice that dates back roughly 7,000 years. The burial place was found under the water in the Gulf of Mexico, and apparently it's going to help scientists to better understand the first people who lived in the territory of what is now Florida. The archaeological site is being called Minnesota Key Offshore, and it appears to have been a place where thousands of years ago, people would have lived. That's because back then there would not have been an ocean, but just a pool of fresh water. Unfortunately, this ancient cemetery is off limits to divers. It's illegal to dig or extract materials from an ancient site. Surprisingly, the authorities have agreed to leave the dead where they're buried. It's believed that the original indigenous people of Florida left their dead in this area before sea levels rose. Because of all the peat at the bottom of the ocean, the bodies have all remained ridiculously well preserved. This is one of the only prehistoric flooded burial sites in the world, with the only others in Israel and Denmark. Number 7. A missing man. Nobody wants to find a guy underwater. This is just not a good place for finding people. Nonetheless, the body of a man from New Jersey who went missing at Lake Tahoe in California has been found about 1,500 feet underwater. According to ABC News, the authorities were alerted to a missing person after a boat washed ashore at the edge of the lake without the guy in it. Considering he couldn't possibly have had a lot of options of where to go, search crews had to begin sifting through the depths of the enormous lake. With the help of the local sheriff's office, the man's body was eventually pulled out about a month after he went missing. It's believed that he jumped off his boat, maybe to go swimming, and his boat took off without him, and he never managed to catch up to it. He then spent the next month sleeping with the fishes at the bottom of the lake. Number 6. Creepy Mayan ruins. Speaking of lakes, scuba divers have been finding some pretty creepy ruins in a volcanic lake in Guatemala. Researchers are hoping to uncover clues about an ancient sacred island that the Mayan pilgrims had flocked to for worship before it eventually was swallowed by the rising waters. Interestingly enough, this underwater ruin was discovered completely by accident by a diver who'd been swimming around in Lake Atitlan, a popular place with tourists. After he found it, nobody really even believed him. And keep in mind, this was back in 1996. It wasn't until around 2010 that people began to take the claims seriously. And this was long after the diver had already named the site Samabaj after himself. Then in 2010, professional archaeologists began looking into the ruins beneath the lake. They used special sonar technology to discover what was down there. And yes, it turned out the guy had been right all along. Researchers discovered some kind of religious structure in the middle of the lake. They believe it had been a prominent place of worship before a volcanic eruption or landslide caused water levels to rise and the ruins to sink. So far, they've found ceremonial monuments, altars, and other mysterious features. They believe that worshippers probably flocked to the area in hired boats, then rowed themselves to the island and offered prayer to their gods. Number 5. Sunken war machines. Stunning new images have emerged, showcasing the creepy remains of Operation Smash. And if you're not sure what Operation Smash was, like me, it was a training exercise held back in 1944, several weeks ahead of the Normandy landing. and it evolved a large assortment of amphibious tanks that are now sitting at the bottom of the ocean slowly decaying. It was also somewhat of a disaster. 6 lives were lost when these armored vehicles sank during the exercise. What happened was that British and Canadian military tanks were launched inside of shallow water. It's because they wanted to test what would happen on D-Day. 32 tanks were launched and 7 sank, with only 25 of them getting to shore. And even though 6 people died when the tanks sank, it taught the British and Canadian forces a very important lesson right before D-Day. When they struck the beach, they knew not to launch their tanks offshore or they'd lose hundreds and hundreds of more people. While this war exercise proved invaluable in the coming battles, nobody ever went down to pull the sunken tanks out of the water, and they're still sitting just off the coast of Dorset Beach. And it's a pretty eerie sight as they barely even look like tanks anymore. They're all covered in silt and sand. It's super gloomy and there's very little light, but still, it's a pretty cool thing to find over 70 years later. Number 4. The vampire squid. The vampire squid has often been called the squid from hell, and it's for very good reason. It's one of the creepiest monsters ever discovered in the dark depths of the ocean. This disturbing little cephalopod can be found throughout many temperate areas, but it does live extremely deep under the water. It was first described as an octopus in 1903, and since then not much more information has been collected on the animal. We know that it's very small, only about a foot long, and we know that its body is blood red color. The squid's body color mixed with its weird cape give it the appearance of being part of some underwater undead organization. And while you're not really in any danger from the vampire squid unless you're hanging out about 3,000 feet beneath the water, it's still one of the creepiest animals out there. Anything with 8 arms and a cape is something we should probably all stay away from. But it's important to mention that the vampire squid does not actually drink blood. It feeds mostly on detritus, also known as marine snow, or falling organic debris that makes for a tasty snack. Number 3. Mysterious submerged warplane. At the bottom of Lake Norman in North Carolina, firefighters stumbled upon the discovery of a lifetime. They found a mysterious plane submerged 100 feet below the surface of the water using sonar imaging. The firefighters had not even been looking for the airplane in the first place. They'd been in the middle of a training exercise when they discovered the plane-shaped blip on the radar. And being naturally curious, the firefighters decided to go and investigate. Members of the Charlotte Fire Department dive team went into the lake, and before long they had stumbled upon the single-engine aircraft where it sat undisturbed and a little creepy at the bottom. There were no victims inside, and the crew couldn't manage to open the doors of the plane. In the end, they were forced to leave it where it was. Nobody immediately knew who the plane had belonged to or what it was doing down there, until a woman named Barbara Anderson came forward and said she believed the sunken aircraft was hers. This is because 30 years ago, her plane had fallen to the bottom of Lake Norman after flight instructors had been using it in a training exercise. The pilots flying the plane landed, but they forgot to put the gear up and so the plane sunk. Even though that plane probably does belong to Barbara, it's doubtful she'll be getting it anytime soon because it's still at the bottom of Lake Norman. Number 2. The Lake Michigan Crucifix. America's lakes have all kinds of really strange and creepy things inside of them. The creepiest thing ever found in an American lake has to be the crucified Jesus statue drowned beneath Lake Michigan. And this thing is kind of enormous. It's 11 feet tall and crafted from pure white marble. The statue was meant to be a life-size replica of the crucified Jesus Christ. It was built in Italy back in 1956 at the request of a family after they lost their young child to a gun accident. The statue was crafted and then delivered to the United States, weighing nearly 1 ton. However, the Christ statue arrived at the local church with a broken arm and other parts that were also damaged. The family decided that the statue was not fit to honor their child, and so they just dumped it in Lake Michigan. I mean, sure, what else are you gonna do with a giant statue of Jesus when it's got a broken arm? Actually, the family themselves didn't dump it in the lake. They sold it to a local diver, and in 1962, he submerged it under 65 feet of water as a tribute to someone else. The statue then sat underwater for 20 years, until in 1986 when it was moved closer inland to only about 800 feet off the shore. Now in the winter, people can walk on the ice and see Jesus Christ beneath their feet. A hole is even cut sometimes in the ice so that people can get a clearer view. But to be entirely honest, staring at a murky statue of Jesus that somebody tossed into a lake through a hole in the ice is a little bit creepy. Number 1. The Foss Lake Mystery. The FOSS Lake mystery is one of the creepiest underwater mysteries ever. It all happened when 6 skeletons were found inside 2 cars pulled from FOSS Lake, each of which could potentially solve separate disappearances from the 1950s and the 1970s. It's an absolute mess. First, 3 adults went missing in the 1950s. Then in 1970, a group of teenagers mysteriously disappeared. Then in 2013, 2 vehicles were found completely by accident after some highway patrol officers decided to test their new sonar equipment. The sonar equipment revealed the 2 cars at the bottom of the lake, and after they pulled the cars out, they found a whole lot of bodies. According to the 2013 news report from The Independent, the officers pulled out the 1969 Chevrolet Camaro and 1950 Chevrolet that had been buried in the mud at the bottom of the lake. The police found 3 skeletons inside each of the vehicles. While the police never officially confirmed the identities of those found trapped inside the cars, they have said that there is likely a link between the occupants of the Camaro and the 3 missing teenagers, and also the occupants of the second Chevrolet and the 3 seniors who went missing in the late 50s. How exactly both groups of people drove into the lake is still a complete mystery. Nobody knows if it happened by accident, if there's something horrifying in the lake that somehow pulled them into it, or if there's foul play afoot. The only thing we know for sure is that it's a creepy mystery. So, how do you feel about these seriously creepy discoveries? Let me know which one is the creepiest in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We'll see you again soon for another awesome video.